feel like this whole look screams that my parents didn't give me enough attention as a child.
Nobody feels sorry for you.
Hey there guys, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for another spooky episode of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. Oh, what was that? My shoulder? Yes, it was.
Mrs. Peterson, you cheeky girl.
If you like all things true crime, supernatural, UFO, conspiracy theory, and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you each week with our true crime killer weekends, and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our weirdo Wednesdays, where we'll discuss something spooky I've heard. If you would like to further support this wee channel o' mine, then please feel free to visit www.patreon.com/Megan True Crime. I will leave a small disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. It does involve details of violent crime and also arson. If that's a trigger point for you, then please feel free to turn away now. Hey my wee gremlins, you may be asking yourselves, why is Megan dressed like a gothic brothel owner? And the reason is I'm celebrating the marriage of Kravis. What do you make of the oldest Kardashian daughter's Italian gothic wedding? I know she displeased a lot of people by wearing the Virgin Mary on her veil with a mini dress. Personally, I love it. Go for it. Do you know what I'm saying? She got quite a lot of hate for that. And my opinion on the matter is I'm sure there's a lot of people in Hollywood who've done a lot worse. I can't believe we're almost halfway through the year and summer is right around the corner. So for most of you that will be a time of joy, having family barbecues, enjoying the sunshine, getting a cheeky tan. But for me, this is a season of genuine fear, because this is the time when my arch nemesises come out to play. I'm talking about bees, flies, and wasps, y'all. Every lawnmower that's buzzing in the distance sends me into a panic attack, and I spend my summer season walking around with a nervous tick.
No, not 6. I said 7.
But insects aside, there's plenty of other reasons why I enjoy autumn, winter slightly more. I mean, you've got Halloween, you know, that speaks for itself. You all know I love Halloween over here. And I have my birthday. And birthdays can be a kind of funny thing. You know, they stir up different emotions in different people. Some love them, others not so much. I mean, me, I've been turning 21 for the last 9 years. Whether you're a party goer or party pooper, two things are true about birthdays. One, we all have them, and two, we never know which one will be our last. So next time you're making a wish and blowing out your candles, be careful just who you invite to celebrate with you. Tonight, everyone, we will be diving into the mysterious murder of Tara Baker. It was just before 11:30 a.m. on the 19th of January 2001 when firefighters were called to a home at 160 Fawn Drive in Athens, Georgia. When they arrived, black smoke and flames billowed out of the windows of the small bungalow. First responders did call out to any potential survivors who may have been trapped inside the home, but when they heard nothing back, they stormed inside to put out the fire. As they moved from room to room, they eventually discovered the source of the flames, and at that point, this normal house fire turned into a murder investigation. There, in the back bedroom, lay the remains of a young woman, still ablaze. It was apparent that this had been no accident and that arson had been used to destroy crucial evidence. The body was badly burnt beyond recognition, so who was this Jane Doe and why would someone want her dead? In January 20th, 1977 in Fulton County, Georgia, Georgia, a young woman named Virginia Barker gave birth to her first child, a healthy baby girl named Tara Barker. Tara Louise Barker was said to have been an absolute joy to raise. She and her mum were inseparable from a really young age. Sadly, her father wouldn't be a permanent fixture in her life, however. He had his own stuff going on, and at the age of 10, Tara's mum remarried and moved to Lovejoy in Georgia. Virginia's new husband, Lindsay Baker, was one of the kindest men she had ever been with. She said that he put her family first and even raised Tara as if she was his own little girl. They were a proper wee family unit, and eventually Tara would take her stepfather's surname of Baker. Not much of a difference, and eventually the only child would be joined by 3 younger siblings, Meredith, Adam and Kevin. She loved being a big sister, but unfortunately with Kevin being the baby, he would often become a plaything for Tara and her girlfriends. What they would do is take their Cabbage Patch dolls, and if you don't know what a Cabbage Patch doll is, you're missing out, ladies and gents, because it was this 1980s doll and it had a birth certificate and really creepy dimples. So they would take the clothes off these dolls and dress up baby Kevin in raincoats and rubber rings. It got to a point where Virginia had to eventually tell the girls that they were forbidden from playing with the baby. I don't know if my family dynamic was just a wee bit different, because I felt like, if anything, as the youngest sibling, I just terrorised the shit out of my sister. If she had a hairband on, I would grab it. If she was just sitting, reading a book happily, I would grab it. I'm sorry, Danny. Tara and her younger sister Meredith were close, but they didn't really have much in common because of that 9-year age gap. But she and her brother Adam were a different story. They were glued at the hip, and they both had a strong passion for the law and for justice. Adam said because his sister was a good bit older than them all, she would often play mediator between them. She would sit them down and talk it through and try and make the peace, which is something she was apparently very good at. Adam Baker said his sister was always a fixer. She could never see someone sad or excluded. The family would describe Tara as their northern star, always guiding them in the right direction. On the weekends, Tara would help out at her stepfather turned legal guardian, Lindsay Baker's funeral parlour. It was a family business and she was always willing to lend a hand. Now, when you look at pictures of Tara, you can't overlook the fact that she's a gorgeous girl. She's a babe. But this was apparently something that she wasn't aware of. Growing up, Tara's parents said she was always more focused on getting good grades and feeding her mind. Yes, she was drop dead gorgeous, but that wasn't going to get her into college, and Tara wanted to be seen as a woman of substance. After graduating from Lovejoy High School in 1995, it was no surprise to Tara's friends and family when she was accepted into Georgia State University to study both political science and paralegal studies. One funny story I read from Virginia about Tara was that when she was in kindergarten, she seemed extra intelligent. Maybe a wee bit too intelligent. People began to worry when Tara was writing upside down and back to front. Her teachers worried this might have been an early sign of a learning disability, and so they had her assessed. But it turned out that no, she wasn't struggling with the schoolwork. It was actually the opposite. She was bored. As aforementioned, Tara always had a passion for law and criminal justice, and when she wasn't, playing mediator in her sibling dramas, she was holding fake court cases with her teddy bears. Whilst attending university, Tara was extremely popular. Many people couldn't believe that someone who looked this good and was that intelligent could be so nice. And one of the girls she befriended was her friend named Ashley, who also joined a local sorority named Alpha Delta Pi. The young 20-year-old was said to be always looking out for her sorority sisters. In fact, on one occasion, one of them went out for a late night rendezvous and never came home when she was supposed to. So Tara, being deeply involved in criminal justice, suddenly began to fear the worst. She was thinking all sorts of mad thoughts, so what she did was get all of her friends, all of the local fraternities, and organise a search party. So eventually the girl Ashley, who was MIA, comes home to her nearest and dearest making missing posters for her, and she says that sorry, she was just out getting some. Her fellow sorority sisters said that Tara was a massive Molly Ringwald fan, and I love Molly Ringwald movies. She was watching 16 Candles and Pretty in Pink on replay. She knew word by word, and she was always just looking for a guy who can embody those 1980s heartthrobs. However, with her rigorous class schedule, the young teen had no time at all to be dancing at frat parties or meeting a guy of her own. She'd actually set herself the almost impossible task of completing 2 degrees within 2 years. Whilst all this is going on, she's also interning as a paralegal for attorney Jack Hancock. But sadly, that wasn't the only reason why her plate would be full that year. Her mother, Virginia, fell really ill, and without a second's thought, Tara travelled back to Lovejoy to help out with the children and also to fill in at the funeral parlour. Tara was such a blessing to everyone that knew her. She was always so focused on taking care of everyone else that she forgot to find some romance for herself. Until one night she went to a dance with some friends and she met a biology and chemistry student named Chris. They had mutual acquaintances, but this was the first time they had had a proper chance to speak, and the attraction was instant. Little things like the way Tara's nose would crinkle when she laughed made Chris fall that much deeper in love with her. Her colleagues at the firm where she worked said that Tara's heart belonged to Chris instantly and that the two were meant to be. However, their love would be put to the test when in 1998, Tara graduated with a degree in political science and paralegal studies with a 4.0 GPA. She was offered a place at the University of Georgia's School of Law. Chris was a small town guy. He dreamt of settling down and having a family, whereas Tara had aspirations of becoming a high-powered career woman. The two decided they were on separate paths and chose to call it a day. But if you've ever been between the ages of 16 and 25, you will know that some breakups just don't last. And during this break, Chris realised that Tara was the love of his life and the two soon got back together. On the weekends that she would have free, Tara and Chris would spend time shopping for antiques. Now a plumber by trade, Chris enjoyed taking something old and refurbishing it to make it new again. But as the young lovers would hold hands, swanning around town, there was others who would kill to take Chris's place. Each Friday, an odd classmate would dress in a 3-piece suit to simply ask Tara out. Over and over again, she told him politely, no, I have a boyfriend, but every Friday, there he would be, dressed in his formal wear. Seems like Mr. Bean couldn't take no for an answer. Other students would say he was a bit of a strange character. He was always really over-friendly with other female classmates, which often led to him being friend-zoned. Tara felt sorry for him. She thought he was just a loner, but to her other classmates, his behaviour appeared more menacing. During a lecture, the professor was discussing a case study from a sexual assault allegation, and when creepy classmate was asked on his opinion about this particular case, he said that he felt like the woman was asking for it because she was wearing revealing clothes in front of a whole class. Just, Ted Bundying it up. But this walking red flag wasn't the only shady chap in Tara's life. No, when she moved universities, she also moved part-time jobs and began working as a paralegal for attorney Fortson and Bentley. Now, her new boss, who still remains unnamed to this day, was allegedly a graduate from a top 5 school in America, which means he either went to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, or Pennsylvania University. If you attended any of these schools, keep your ears open because trust me, this man has a very niche personality. It would be hard to miss. This man, one of the youngest attorneys in the office at the time, in his late 20s roughly, asked the other female colleagues to refer to him as Your Majesty or king. A known philanderer, this man was often forbidden from going on nights out with female colleagues because he had had an affair with a younger colleague only a year prior. Now, I don't blame his wife because it was said that when he would go out for after work drinks, he would get a little bit crazy. It was always snowing in Georgia. You catch my drift? He and Tara gradually became close. They would email back and forth, and eventually their relationship will be called into question. But it is important to say that their colleagues were certain they were just friends. Although it would seem that Tara sometimes showed kindness to those who didn't always deserve it, she was far from green when it came to her own safety. The Southern Belle was well aware just how dangerous this world could be. She would always tell her friends when they were walking home at night to make sure they called her the minute they got in the house. Her mother, Virginia, said that Tara would always lock the car doors when she was driving around, and when she eventually moved into an off-campus apartment with her friend Ashley, she would never answer the door to a stranger. Probably a little bit overcautious from the numerous traumatizing case studies she'd seen in class, this fear is what led Tara to want to study real estate law. She told her mum it was happy law. People were starting new chapters in their lives and it was a far cry from the horrors of criminal law. The third week in January began like any other for Tara. On Wednesday, January 16th, she went to classes as usual, got home and called her mother. She was telling her mum about a classmate who was a little bit too close for comfort, but that she would handle it herself. She also said that there was a colleague who was showing some interest in her, but that her heart was still with Chris. On Thursday, the 18th of January, Tara went to her classes and then picked up some things at the local supermarket. The girl working there remembered that Tara appeared to be buying a lot of food, as if she was perhaps cooking a meal for two. After this, she then headed to the library with two of her college friends, Katie and Eugenia. The girls would often study together. Katie said that Tara would spend a little bit more time on her studies as she was very dedicated. So often around 7 p.m, Katie and Eugenia would clock off and go and party, but Tara would stay there until at least midnight. By the time Tara packed up her books, it was already pitch black outside, and the almost birthday girl made her way back to her bungalow. Ashley would be out for the night, so it would just be Tara home alone. When she arrived home, she realised she still hadn't heard from Katie, so she gave her a call to give her a right good old ear bashing, you know, the usual, why didn't you call me, you could have been murdered, etc. Can you even imagine how bad I am in that respect? Yeah, I'm sorry, but if you don't text me back for 10 minutes, I've already got you dead and buried. After she hung up from yelling at her friend, she called a female colleague who worked at Fortson and Bentley, but she never answered. This would be the last known movement of Tara Louise Baker, and what happened in the hours that followed would remain a mystery to law enforcement and to Tara's family. As Tara's classmates and friends took their seats on Friday the 19th of January, they looked around and noticed that Tara was missing. They didn't think much of it. Perhaps she was just skipping class so she could get extra glam for her birthday night out that night. But as they called her throughout the day to make arrangements with no response, they began to worry. That evening, Tara's nearest and dearest spilled into the bar with balloons and cards for the birthday girl, but in a weird, shocking turn of events, she wasn't there. She hadn't even turned up for her own birthday night. And when they tried to call her landline and her cell phone, she wasn't picking up. This was so unlike her. She'd been buzzing about this night out for weeks, so why didn't she turn up? Well, a gruesome discovery made just hours before would unfortunately answer this burning question. Now, whilst producing this channel, I have read a lot of court case documents and a lot of news articles, and for me, this one is up there with the most annoying handling of evidence I've ever seen. Seriously, you will be screaming at your laptop, your phone, your TV, wherever you're watching this, so just hold on to your knickers, okay? Initially, on the morning of Friday the 19th of January, whilst Tara's classmates wondered why she hadn't made it to class, 12 firefighters stormed the off-campus bungalow. One of the firemen first on the scene noticed that the hob on the oven had been turned up the full way, and a sheet had been placed over it in order to help the flames spread. So, using his big boy brain, he switches it off using the handle. But then he remembers, oh, it's a crime scene. So what shall I do? I'll turn it back on again. Now, I'm not saying that him turning it off was stupid because, you had to stop the fire some way. I'm saying that turning it back on was stupid. But we understand that because we have the comprehensive reading skills of above a 4-year-old. We then jump to later that afternoon when the family of Tara Baker are told in the most bizarre sense that their daughter might have been murdered. 6.5 hours after Tara Baker's body was discovered, her mother Virginia received a phone call, and without so much as a hello, she was asked if her daughter had ever been arrested or had her fingerprints taken. Confused, Virginia was like, no, why? And then she was told that there's been a fire and we have a body. But no formal identification had taken place at this point because, much like that of Tara, her roommate Ashley was also not answering her cell phone. Tara's boyfriend Chris would receive a phone call of his own that afternoon. He was picked up by investigators and asked to ID the body found in the apartment. He was hesitant at first, but investigators told him that if he didn't do it, Virginia Baker would have to do it. Tara's car was parked outside the bungalow, so investigators did have a strong suspicion that it was her body. Chris was in complete denial and said that investigators had zero compassion and from the beginning were already kind of treating him like a suspect. A devastated Chris was fully expecting to be taken to the local morgue. But no, he noticed en route that they were driving to 160 Fawn Drive. The mystery woman's remains had been left at the scene of the crime for hours as dozens of emergency services staff were coming in and out of the crime scene. In disbelief, Chris is then taken to the front door of Tara's home until firefighters actually stop the detectives and say, no, this is a crime scene. He can't come in here. Chris was then taken to a police car and asked to look at a photo of the scene instead. And two things proved to Chris that the remains, charred beyond recognition, were the love of his life. One, the bedroom that the body was found in. Amongst these burnt knickknacks, he could see antiques that he and Tara had hand-picked out together. This was Tara's bedroom. He could also see something glinting near the head of the corpse. and it turned out to be the diamond earrings that he had gifted Tara the year before. She loved her diamond earrings and would never take them off even to shower. Virginia, Lindsay and their children waited at the local police station until they were told the shocking news, and the way they were told this information is possibly as insensitive as it gets. Tara's sister Meredith, who bear in mind was only 15 at the time, remembers the lead investigator coming into the family's waiting room and telling them flippantly, yeah, it's her. But she put up a hell of a fight though. We got some good stuff under her fingernails. The Baker family didn't even know that this was a homicide. They thought it was just a dead body. Someone had maybe died in a fire, so that again was news to them. Tara's cause of death has never been formally confirmed, neither to the family or to the public, but people talk, firemen talk to their wives, policemen certainly talk to their wives, and eventually the Bakers had to hear that their daughter and sister had been beaten, strangled and stabbed through the media. We also have no official time of death. Allegedly, this could only be determined by a wall clock that had fallen and broken during the fire, which stopped somewhere between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. on the morning of Friday the 19th of January. This wasn't the only key piece of information that was held back from the Baker family. For 10 years, yes, 10 years, the family were denied a death certificate for Tara. They were subject to internet fraudsters who would use Tara's bank cards in fraudulent transactions, and when creditors would come a-calling, they would have to go over it again and relive this whole experience again by telling them exactly what happened to Tara. Along with this, some other critical details could have been released during those first few crucial days after Tara's murder, which would have probably helped solve the case. An eyewitness had come forward to say that she had seen a man running through the local park, Deer Park, wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt at 7 a.m. on the morning that Tara's body was found. No composite sketch was ever drawn up for this, and this information was kept from the public for 2 years after her murder. Virginia, understandably frustrated, had asked investigators if the area around the bungalow had been searched. She recalled it was a really rainy, muddy day, and perhaps some footprints could have been found from the killer. But to that, she was laughed out of the room by investigators who told her that she had been watching too many true crime shows. Well, maybe you've not been watching enough, Mr. Policeman, because you're not doing your job. As if that's not enough to make a grieving mother seethe with anger, it would later come to light that several other leads had not been followed up on. On the night before Tara's murder, a call had been made to the University of Georgia's student directory, someone asking for Tara's phone number. This unfortunately went unreported, as the woman who took the call was told by her supervisor just to ignore it, despite the red flags. But despite the potential of this clue, it was never followed up on. The student phone records were never checked, and of course the mystery caller never came forward, even to this day. At this point in the investigation, Tara's mother, Virginia, is tired. She's frustrated and probably a good bit paranoid. Was it Tara's boyfriend who did this? Was it one of her friends? She has no idea who she can trust. For years, Tara's family searched for answers, and it would appear they were getting no closer when they received a notification of death certificate in lieu of a real death certificate from the coroner, in which it stated her cause of death as multiple injuries. All snippets of information that the Bakers have now have only been gained by them doing their own digging. For years, investigators have rejected any offer of help from outside police departments in this 20-year-old cold case. Famed forensic scientist Henry Lee even offered his expertise on the case, to which he received a bizarre response. Yes, he could work on the Tara Baker case if if he so pleased, as long as he kept all of his findings confidential between himself and the Athens Police Department. It was disclosed by a first responder that there was no signs of forced entry, which lends itself to the theory that Tara knew her killer. There was only one item stolen from her apartment that day. It was her laptop. Now, you might think that perhaps this was a financially motivated crime, but no, there was several expensive antiques and knickknacks and cash in Tara's room that was never touched. So why did her killer take her laptop? Was she perhaps corresponding with someone over email and they didn't want those emails to get into the wrong hands? It's been heavily reported that the killer only used items in and around Tara's home in the killing, which says that this was an impulsive killing and the person was acting on emotion. The fact that the murderer set fire to the home in the hopes that this would destroy any physical evidence also points to the theory that this person was in Tara's social circle. In the event of a police investigation, they knew that they were within a pool of suspects who maybe asked for their DNA or their fingerprints. So, if we stick with the idea that Tara definitely knew her killer, we have to ask, who would she have trusted enough to invite inside before they struck? There was 3 men who would have done anything for Tara, but would they kill for her? Firstly, we have the seemingly harmless boyfriend, Chris. He was extremely compliant with law enforcement from day one, but her family still had their suspicions, and it's understandable 61% of female homicides are committed by an intimate partner. Was he just another one of these statistics, or was he an innocent man? Were there cracks in Tara and Chris's relationship that we knew nothing about? I mean, they did break up briefly before she went to law school and then quickly reconciled, but was he insecure about her new life? According to Tara's friends, he wasn't the controlling or jealous type, and there was no violence in the relationship. Early on in the investigation, he was exonerated as he had passed a polygraph test and had a rock-solid alibi. Sadly, Chris was just another victim in this thoughtless crime. A strong contender from the start in investigators' minds was Mr. Three-Piece Suit, the creepy wee classmate, and they were so convinced that he was involved in Tara's murder that he got Tara's nearest and dearest to stalk him. Her friends would say that they would walk out their front door and the investigators would be sitting on their doorstep, asking them to tail this guy, follow him around campus, and sometimes even look inside his backpack to see if there was anything suspicious. On the day Tara's body was found, he came into class with a large cut on his hand, which he just couldn't explain. Tara's mum, Virginia, said she always had a feeling about this guy because of how uneasy he made Tara. She had called her mum only days before the murder, saying that, yeah, he was a bit out of line and she would handle it. Or did he handle her? He's also the only one out of all of the persons of interest that attends the University of Georgia and that would know about the student directory. But before we lock him up and throw away the key, we have to discuss another suspect. Suspect number 3, Tara's boss from Fortson and Bentley. Was this Ivy League educated man with a wealthy family closer to Tara than we originally thought? Despite their close friendship, he would not be attending Tara's birthday bash on the Friday night. His wife had arrived back from a business trip and had told him, no,
You naughty.
you're not going to hang out with your female colleagues. You can stay home and be miserable with me. Sounds like every Saturday night in my house. Most of his co-workers said that, yeah, sometimes he could be a wee bit inappropriate with the ladies, but Tara just laughed it off. This seems harmless, doesn't it? But it was his behaviour in the days after Tara's murder that raised the most eyebrows. Colleague X, as we'll call him, didn't turn up to work on the day that Tara's body was found with absolutely no explanation as to why he was missing. He didn't go to Tara's birthday bash as planned, but a couple of days later he attended a colleague's house party and he was said to be acting scary. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the cocaine, but he was downright strange. Several colleagues also noticed some deep scratches that were fresh on his neck. When they began discussing Tara's case, he just comes right out and says, her dad did it. The father he's referring to is her biological father, Mr. Barker. He claimed that apparently Tara had received some upsetting phone calls from her biological dad about changing her name legally. Tara had always gone by Tara Baker since her mother remarried, but she hadn't legally changed her name until she went to law school. But I really doubt that her biological dad was too bothered about all of this. Yeah, it might have hurt his feelings initially, but he was kind of in and out of Tara's life. Is this something he would kill for? Probably not. It does make you question the fact that this man brought it up at the party. Was he trying to deflect the attention away from himself and his neck scratches? In the weeks that followed, he was extremely withdrawn. He seemed very defensive at the slightest mention of Tara's name, and he would sit in his office with his face buried in his hands. He lawyered up pretty quickly, and then he and his family moved out of Athens. For years, the family hunted this faceless man until in 2010 it seemed like there may be a break in the case. A maintenance man who did work on Tara's bungalow before was seen entering Tara's street on the morning her body was found. This was so weird, it was actually captured by a news team that were filming in the area, and they just happened to catch this guy in the background. In the video, the man's seen pacing back and forth, his arms are folded, he's clearly stressed, and it would also explain the fact that there was no signs of forced entry. He was a maintenance man who worked on the off-campus homes. He would have had access to Tara's house. He tried to commit suicide only 3 weeks after Tara's murder. When he failed, he was asked why he did this. He said that it was because his girlfriend broke up with him. A former small-town drug dealer, this guy had no motive to kill Tara. He didn't know her. But only a few days after her body was discovered, he was said to have been trying to sell a laptop that looked a lot like Tara's at a house party. The last few cases I've done, people have been trying to sell victims' laptops at house parties. I've never been to a house party where someone's been like, hey, want to buy a laptop? Maybe I'm just hanging out with the wrong crowd. This is where DNA would really come in handy, because the maintenance man is the only one of the suspects that is African American. So one little drop of DNA could quickly rule him out against the other suspects, but we're still waiting. I know in these kind of cases, theories can grow arms and legs, and usually the most plausible explanation is the right one. I mean, we've just seen the case of Brittany Drexel that has been solved, the young woman who went missing in Carolina on spring break weekend, and we all thought for years that it was a human trafficker. We heard these stories that she had been fed to alligators and she'd been seen at several locations, house parties, weeks after, but none of this was true. She had just been grabbed by a local weirdo driving along. He saw her walking back to her hotel and took that opportunity to grab her. For that reason, the creepy classmate and the co-worker are definitely at the front of my suspect list. Her family has done their best to ensure that she doesn't become another faceless victim of a cold case crime. They have organised a scholarship in Tara's name to make sure that her legacy lives on, and proudly. As the days turn into months and the months turn into years, many people wonder if this case will ever be solved or if the Athens PD even want it solved. Keeping key details to themselves when it's been 20 years I mean, clearly whatever you're doing is not working. You've still not caught this person. So what is the harm in letting a little bit of information out at a time to try and jog people's memories and get interest in this case started again? We still have so many questions. Was there DNA under her fingernails? Why have her emails never been checked through a separate computer? Tara's mother said that the police department were very, old school, and they just didn't know how the technology worked at the time. So what is being done now to get justice for Tara Baker? Tara's father sadly passed away without ever knowing what happened to his daughter, and we can't let that happen to anyone else in this family. We can't allow the woman who believed so much in justice to not receive any of her own. No one is able to keep this kind of dark secret to themselves. Did a friend maybe tell you over a couple of drinks? Did you think they were kidding? If there's something that sticks out in your mind, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll leave the relevant numbers in the description box below. Tara Louise Baker was once described as the northern star of her family, and without her, they are truly lost. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up for me. It really helps my channel. Please feel free to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I want to say a big thank you to each and every one of you. I'm on a really harsh wedding diet, and yeah, you've been my support during this difficult time. I love you all so much, so please remember, lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and if you're the kind of man who asks people to call you king and your majesty, just take a nap in the bath. See ya!